It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was humiliating. Imagine standing in a freezing stone corridor of a palace, surrounded by servants, and trying to relieve yourself without ever taking off your dress. This is not a joke. This is how royal women lived. Behind the silk, the satin, the jewels, and the towering powdered wigs, there was a secret no one dared speak aloud, because every queen, princess, duchess, and lady-in-waiting, no matter how powerful, eventually had to go. And in a time before plumbing, before toilets, and before dignity, it was a royal nightmare. Let's go back to 18th century France, the Palace of Versailles. Glorious, opulent, and absolutely reeking. The halls were lined with gold, yes, but also with urine. Chamber pots sat behind velvet curtains. Sometimes, when no servant was around, courtiers would relieve themselves in stairwells, behind drapes, even in fireplaces. But, for women in particular, royal women, there was no such thing as privacy, and with their dresses, privacy was physically impossible. Take Marie Antoinette. Each morning she was dressed by a team of attendants, layer by layer, chemise, corset, petticoats, paniers, to widen the hips, underskirts, overskirts, stays, embroidered bodices, lace cuffs, and finally, the gown itself. The entire structure could weigh over 25 pounds. Now, imagine being wrapped like that for 10 hours a day. What happens when nature calls? She couldn't go to a private bathroom. There were none. Instead, she had to rely on something known as a burdaloo, a small porcelain pot, sometimes shaped like a gravy boat, designed to fit under her skirts while she squatted slightly, all while standing up. But she wasn't alone. No royal woman ever was. A servant would crouch down and hold the pot. Another would stand by to adjust the skirts. A third might dab perfume under the queen's nose to cover the scent. And depending on the time of day and the presence of other nobles, this entire humiliating procedure could take place while others were watching. There was no such thing as shame. Or rather, there was, but you weren't allowed to show it. At Versailles, even bodily functions were theatre. There's one recorded account of a duchess who passed wind during a formal dinner and had to stand and curtsy afterward. Etiquette dictated that you acknowledged your body's betrayal with grace. Royal women often developed digestive issues from constantly holding it in. They were so tightly laced in corsets that their organs were compressed. Many were chronically constipated, but still expected to smile. And what if a woman was menstruating? There were no pads, no tampons, just rags, called clouts, which were tied between the legs with thin straps or belts. Changing them meant lifting every layer of the dress, usually with help, and hoping nothing leaked. Bloodstains on royal gowns weren't uncommon, and unlike today, no one blamed the clothing, they blamed the woman. It was unclean, some said. Undignified, a failure of self-control, as if she could control biology. But let's talk about public toilets in castles and palaces. Some castles had garderobes, vertical shafts built into the outer walls, essentially a hole above open air. Waste dropped straight down into a moat. Or pit. Sounds simple, but in winter, it was freezing. In summer, it was swarming with flies. And for a woman in a dress with layers of skirts and bone stays, it was dangerous. There are records of noblewomen falling into the shafts while trying to squat. Some were rescued, some weren't. So instead, many royals refused to eat or drink before public events just to avoid the risk. Imagine being so afraid of relieving yourself, you risk dehydration at your own coronation. It didn't get better in the Victorian era. In fact, it got worse. Victorian dresses grew even larger. Hoops and crinolines could span 5 feet across. Women had to turn sideways to enter doors, and yet, the bathroom problem remained. One popular solution was the urinette, a type of portable urinal for women, but it wasn't discreet. And if you were in a crowded ballroom, there were no modern ladies' rooms. There were servants' closets, literally closets, where a maid would help lift your skirts, remove undergarments which often lacked a crotch to make things easier, and position the urinette. Still, accidents happened. There are written accounts of royal women urinating down their legs, the liquid pooling inside their hoop skirts, only for it to drip out slowly across the ballroom floor. But everyone ignored it. No one would dare embarrass a duchess, because dignity wasn't real, it was performance. The Queen of England had a private water closet, but private meant attended by 2 maids and a lady-in-waiting. It took 3 people to help her urinate, and afterward, they'd empty the waste behind a screen. Even worse, doctors at the time often believed that holding in urine showed moral strength, so women were praised for their self-denial, even as their kidneys swelled. And while royal men also suffered some indignities, they could often relieve themselves outdoors, behind a hedge, or into a chamber pot tucked in their coat. Women had no such freedom. Freedom itself was denied. Because to be royal, as a woman, meant being watched constantly. Even childbirth was public. When a royal woman gave birth, the room was filled not just with doctors and midwives, but courtiers, bishops, ministers, all watching to ensure the child wasn't swapped. Imagine being in labor for 20 hours, screaming into a pillow, while dozens of men watch your body tear open, then being told to smile. Royal women were expected to be graceful at all times, even when bleeding, even when in agony, even when soiled. The dress was everything. It wasn't just fabric, it was a prison. But despite everything, some women pushed back in the late 1800s. Princess Louise, daughter of Queen Victoria, famously refused to wear the larger hoop skirts. She demanded more practical gowns, and even designed some herself. Later, in the early 1900s, Queen Alexandra pushed for indoor plumbing to be installed in royal residences. Bathrooms with running water, privacy, dignity. It took decades, but slowly, things changed. Yet the memory lingers because behind every painting of a serene porcelain-faced princess was a woman struggling to hide her body's basic needs under lace and boning. A woman who couldn't sit down without 3 people lifting her dress. A woman who was blamed for leaking blood in a palace with no toilets. A woman who held her bladder so long she fainted in front of the king. This is the truth royal history rarely tells, that even queens had to pee, and they paid for it with their pride. So the next time you see a portrait of a noblewoman in a dress so wide it could block a doorway, remember, she was probably desperate to go, and no one dared let her. If this story opened your eyes to the hidden human struggles behind royal glamour, hit that like button to show your support. Comment below with your thoughts. Which moment shocked you the most? And don't forget to subscribe for more raw, untold stories from history, the kind they don't teach in school. Share this video with someone who still thinks being a princess was all diamonds and tiaras, because the truth is often much messier.